Hello everyone, hope you're having a great day. Matt Colville just released a new video about pulling back the curtain in D&D, and it got me thinking about my journey as a DM and some of the things that I have learned and some of the things that I've experimented with in the game, and I figure that some of it may be useful to hear, and I want to talk about them, so here we are. Let's talk about pulling back the curtain. So first, let's define our terms. When I say pull back the curtain, I am specifically referring to letting my players know meta-knowledge about how the game is run outside of the context of the game itself. So, for instance, I let them know that there was, in fact, a lizard person that was going to kidnap them if they did this thing, and then I hand them the thing that I was reading saying that specifically, this is what is going to happen. Generally speaking, players are expected to suspend their disbelief and believe in the secondary reality, but sometimes that belief is compromised and there is this arbitrary sense of authority that is given to things that are written down that people tend to respect. So if you show them that this outcome was written down and planned for some reason, this is just how the human brain works, I'm not throwing any shade, the reality of the secondary world is reinforced and you can get back to the game. It's just a weird phenomenon that happens, even though there is little difference between what is written down and what is being explained up here. It's just this weird case where things become a lot less arbitrary when they are written down. It's just kind of how our brain works. And I became aware of this very early on in my DM journey. There were tons of instances where there was doubt in what I was explaining and that there was just a sense like I was making things up on the fly because, honestly, that is at least half of what happens behind the DM screen is you improvising and reacting to what the players do. However, and this is completely arbitrary when it happens, sometimes players feel like they are not living in a secondary reality and their suspension of disbelief is broken for whatever reason. They feel like you're making stuff up. Like what they are doing doesn't matter because whatever they do, you are going to make something up in response and the world that they live in is not alive. It's not real. You're just making stuff up. And that is where the written word really comes in handy. If you plan for this, if you show them that what they are doing is working within the confines of an established system, that secondary reality is cemented and all of a sudden, it's believable. They can live in that world and it is just more fun. However, there is a caveat to this. If you pull back that curtain and show them the gameplay mechanics that are working behind the scenes, automatically you are removing them from that secondary reality and putting them in the meta perspective of you are playing a game. And that in itself can remove the players from the world and the story that you are trying to create. So it's this weird mix where, of course, players know that they are playing a game, but as the DM, you are expected to not treat it that way so that you can draw players in and create an immersive experience. And this dichotomy is contradictory with each other. You can't simultaneously acknowledge that you're playing a game and completely believe in the secondary reality. For instance, yesterday when I was streaming on twitch.tv/RoleCallrp, we were playing Fortunes and Fables, as we do every Wednesday. Wink. Can I wink? Wink. There we go. Moving on. Essentially, they needed to climb a mountain that had a silver dragon living on top of it, and this mountain had all kinds of magical effects happening to it. And before the session started, I had made a comment that I was struggling getting into the swing of things and preparing the game. And in that one comment, I had kind of already broken my players' belief in the secondary world because I had brought up preparation and I had brought up uncertainty about what I was going to happen. And I may have even said the word like, okay, I'm ready to improvise and make things up. And of course, that's part of DMing, but the fact that I said that sets the stage and sets the expectation that I am going to be making stuff up in the session. And that is one of the biggest things that I struggle with because as a DM, I want to talk about the stuff that I make. I am really excited about the things that I make in D&D and I want to share how awesome it was and how proud I am that these systems that I've made and these encounters led to such cool moments. But if I talk to my players about numbers and balancing the encounter and the stats that the monsters have, it no longer becomes a story within that secondary reality. It becomes a numbers crunch. And that can be extremely disappointing and deflating for the players. And as such, DMs, I highly recommend keeping that level of secrecy secret. But simultaneously, as a DM, that can be extremely isolating. As a DM, I want to share in the revelry that my players fear in conquering these challenges, but since I am behind the screen, I am aware of all of the tomfoolery that I am doing and the shenanigery that's happening behind the screens. I know that this encounter was a random encounter. I know that I absolutely was not prepared for going in this room and I pulled it out of my ass. And because I'm aware of it, my belief in the secondary reality is compromised. And the only way that I can get gratification out of it is by looking at my players' joy and seeing that they are having a ton of fun and focusing on the primary reality that I'm familiar with. And that is the fact that I am running a game. This is actually the reason why I think that a lot of people are turned off by DMing, is because when you are DMing, you are absolutely aware that what you are doing is a game at all times, because you are also the rules master. You are the judge, jury, and executioner of everything. And being judge, jury, and executioner, you cannot completely immerse yourself in the secondary reality because you need to make game rulings and you need to push the party in a certain direction that makes the most sense and is the most fun. So with all this in mind, when do you pull back the curtain? When do you let your players know that the secondary reality that they believe in is just a game? And that is the question. Because the belief in the secondary world adds so much to the game experience. And the example that Matt Colville gave in his video is actually the most common reason that I find you pull back the curtain, and that is that your players' trust is compromised. In one reason or another, they do not trust that the systems that they are interacting with are a pre-established system. And whether that is true or not, you need to reestablish that trust for the game to continue. So you need to show them something. You need to show them that you have made a game for them and that the secondary reality that they are living in is moving with them and reacts to them, but also reacts in spite of them. If you do all of those things, then the belief in the secondary reality is established firmly and you can have a game. And of course, the other reason, which is a way worse reason, but it's still something that I do and it's a bad habit, is that you're proud of what you do and you want to share it with someone. Because in very few instances are there cases where talking about the encounter balance or the map creation or how you made that specific high ground in hopes that your archer fighter would use it and rain down hellfire on your enemies. There are very few times where talking about any of that is going to enhance the player's experience. In most cases, it's going to make them feel deflated. It's going to make them feel like you handed it to them. Like what they are interacting with isn't real. Like the secondary reality is made specifically for them. And like what they are doing doesn't matter. It's just a game. And while this is inarguably the case, D&D is all about establishing belief in a secondary reality, in a secondary world. And breaking that compromises the game. Your players want to believe in a secondary reality. They want you to present an illusion that is so believable that they can lose themselves in it. They want you to trick them. So with all this in mind, when do you pull back the curtain? You pull back the curtain to more firmly establish your players' belief in the secondary reality that you have created. Simple as that. In combat, I roll the monster's dice out in the open. Why? So that the players see that I am not fudging them, so that the players know that I am being fair to what is rolled and that the world is moving in spite of them. Why do I occasionally let players see my notes? Why am I freaking building a world with two of my players? To show them that there are things at play, that there is design, that there is depth to the space that they are playing in, that the world moves in spite of them. And that is intrinsic to the design. And I am not just making things up. You are interacting with a secondary reality. Here's the proof. I've pulled back the curtain. And that is basically it. I cannot think of another good reason to pull back the curtain and show your players what's going on. In my mind, the only other possible reason is to share what you have created with your players because you're really proud of it and you want them to see all of the hard work you put in. And occasionally, of course, DMs, get your moment, tell them about the number crunch and all that because, like I said before, DMing can be very isolating and you're entitled to the occasional self-patting on the back. But much like deep fried food, sharing meta knowledge with your players is delicious. but only if it's in small batches. Can you think of another instance in which pulling back the curtain would be a good idea? Let me down in the comments below. I would love to see that. And if you liked what you saw, like, comment, subscribe. We stream on Twitch every Wednesdays and Saturdays. Every Wednesdays and Saturdays. Blech, I can barely talk, but it's the end of the video. Who cares? Thank you everyone so much for watching, and until next time, cheers.